will be fulfilling the responsibility to be an executor? Yeah, I need an active student who will be doing this. Arsalan, are you there? Or rather, you are not active, but
Ye- Yes, sir.
okay. Okay, so you will be doing this thing. So you have to mark every student who will be joining after 8:40. Mark that student as absent. And those students to whom I will ask questions and they will not respond. So mark them absent also. And those students whose names I will call during the lecture at any time, and if they do not respond, so you will also mark their absence. Is that clear? Yeah, I hope so. Okay, in the previous lecture, we know that we have talked about something, the history of American literature, and we have known some of the facts, we have known some of the colonial enterprises, we have known some of the literary jargons, we have known some of the prolific writers of history in the previous lecture. And we also come to know about that how the ties are so strong in American literature, the ties of the other nations and of the other countries, including the France, including the Spain, on the other side, British and Dutch. So they have a strong, I would say, a penetrative effect on the lives of the people of America, and they were almost colonized for more than 300 years till they were emancipated on 4 July 1776. And we've also talked about that how the American Revolution came into being, how they used a protective and protested view against the British sovereignty, and how then they were succeeded in their battles and their continuous wars against the British, and then finally they were succeeded and successful in their battle of freedom. And we also know that in every age, there was a strong influence on the literature, on the art of America because of the colonizers and the colonists, because that strong influence that they have brought from their countries, they try to diffuse the same influence in the country where they have been settled for almost 300 years. And you know that even British Raj, when they came over here, we were also stoutly influenced with the culture of theirs. And what happened afterwards, that even though they are long gone from this land, but still we are doing the same. We are into their grip, into their holds, and we cannot come out of it anymore. It means that all the time the settlers have a strong influence on the language, tradition, culture, history, dresses, food, and everything. And they just change entirely. They did entirely, I would say, that yourselves, your, okay, they are going to change entirely yourselves, your culture, your tradition, your language, and then there is no space for you to celebrate your own culture, your own tradition, and historical events. So we have studied that how the colonial enterprises were so strong on the literature of, I would say, of American literature. Okay, now on the other side, we have also talked about that how American literature is categorized into different sections. The first category that we have discussed was a general category. It was American literature, but in American literature that was Southern American literature. The second type of literature was Afro-American literature. The third category was homosexual. Yeah, you can also exclude this category from this, but you can include Native American literature. So, Native American literature, Afro American literature, or on the other side, White American, or you can call it Southern American literature. These categories and sections of literature were very strong and active. Still, they are active in America. And we had talked about that on the other side, the Afro American literature, in which we have different writers. And one notable writer is Toni Morrison. She has written Jazz, a novel, and then The Beloved, another novel. So these are the milestones of Toni Morrison because she was black, but she is living in America. She was living in America. I also passed away. She was living in America and she was a spokesperson of the African rights while living in America. So she has actually written, I would say, written about the lives of the black people because entrustedly, she was a representative of the black community, of the black people, and she has talked about the slavery, she has talked about the redemption from the slavery, she has talked about that how mentally, physically, or spiritually the black people have been mutilated, the black people have been decimated by the white people. So she has talked about these things. So, being a representative, she has also talked about the process of the migration in her different lectures. And according to that, it is said, not according to her, but according to a rough estimation, there were almost 80 million people, 80 million black people who were transported from their homelands, including children, women, and the men. They were torn apart, they were torn from their homelands, and they were transported to America, the new Americas. And this transportation was held almost in 400 years. And what was the condition over there? You already know that because we have discussed some of it. And this was a category of American literature that is Afro American literature because Afro American is a kind of, you can say, a combined term that means some of the people who are living in America, but they are the representative of Africa. So that is called Afro American literature. You can say that they are using a language of American people, but they are talking of the people of Africa. So that is the category of Afro American literature. Not only Toni Morrison or black writers, but also there are many other people like Harriet Beecher Stowe, who has written Uncle Tom's Cabin. So that is another good example of this Afro American literature because that is also based on different experiences of slavery. And you know that there are different movies on this type of American um, trading of the black slaves. So that category is called Afro American literature, and most importantly, the themes are, you can say, slavery, redemption from slavery, escape, and all the atrocities and tapestries of the black people of the white people on the black people. Okay, the second category, the most important and notably category is Red Indian literature, and whose representative is Henry David Thoreau, and after Henry David Thoreau, Walt Whitman. So they both are the representatives of the Native American literature or the Red Indian literature, and their works are all about the representation, sometimes the representation of the nature, and on the other side, the section of the Native American people, the lifestyle, the culture of the Native American people. And then there is another writer, W.H. Auden. W.H. Auden is another, I would say, representative writer of the Native American literature in the second category. In the third category, in the third category of the same branch of section, Sherman Alexie. Sherman Alexie is another important and I would say uh, a profound and prolific representative of the Native American literature, who has actually given the true meaning to American literature while giving different sections of the history in his poems, in his novels. If you have watched the movie, the Dances with the Wolf, that is a novel first, and then there was a movie, The Dances with the Wolf, and then there is another, uh, I think the Lone Ranger, and so these are some of the novels that he has written. He has also written multiple short stories, if I can recall some of the names. The Search Engine, the Search Engine, and on the other side, this is a short story, The Search Engine, and there is another short story, What You Pawn, What You Pawn, I Will Redeem. What you have, like this is a, I would say, with the title, you can easily understand what you pawn means, what you lend for, what you have as a loan, what you have lent for, I will get it back. It means the Native American writer claims that whatever you have snatched from us in our culture, in our tradition, in our language, so we will get that back. So these two short stories, they truly represent the Native American literature or the Red Indian literature, that is another major category of American literature. And if I can tell you something about the second category of Native American literature, in which there is a short story, The Search Engine. Very interesting story, and if you will ask me to send that story, and you will read it, you will really enjoy that. That Search Engine is all about a girl, and that girl is all the time. I would say that she was a good reader, a profound reader. She went to library, and where she found a book of poems of poetry by W.H. Auden, and there was no name of the writer. There was no name of the book as well, but that was a book, and that book was about the people, the Native American people. But that book was in the library of the white American people. And when she tried to open the book, she found the name W.H. Auden, and she searched that name everywhere. She went to history department. She searched the name whether that this poet exists or not. She couldn't find that name over there. She went to internet. She tried to write the name of that writer, of that poet W.H. Auden. She couldn't find a single thing. So she, even though asked about W.H. Auden to her mother, because she was a historian for almost 50 years, and she said, "No, I do not know." She then went to library in charge, because you know that they know all about the things of the books and the writers. And she said, "No, I do not know about it." So she just kept on searching and searching about that writer, W.H. Auden, because that writer has written about the real experiences of the Native American people while living in the colonies, but she couldn't get anything. At the end, she was actually finding its name, but she found an interview in the Seattle magazine where the name of that writer was mentioned, and there were a couple of questions that were being asked to W.H. Auden by an interviewer. So she was asking questions, and W.H. Auden was responding those questions because he was a true representative of the Native American. And after all, she found a phone number of that writer. I wish so. And then she called him. He didn't pick it, but after that, when the writer picked it, so the Corliss, the name of the girl is Corliss. So she asked a question: "Are you in the reservation of your mind?" And then there was a silence on the other side. So then the story ends. Like this seems to be a dramatic ending. Like we cannot find any, but you know that literature is not all about that you expect from it. So what the story is all about? The story is all about that the white people have hidden or disguised the identity of W.H. Auden because he is a Native American representative. So, if his identity is hidden, so the people may not consider his works too. And on the other side, Collis, she kept on searching about the record, about the historical records of W.H. Auden, but she couldn't get a single clue about the identity of W.H. Auden. Why? Because the white people have hidden the identity of W.H. Auden, even though from the records, from the historical archives, from the internet, from everywhere. So the people may not read or study W.H. Auden's poetry or poems, and they may not get revolutionized. So this is, I would say, the Native American literature in which they have discussed about their hidden and disguised and mutilated identities. So this is a separate category. And every single category is, I would say, a, a package, a full package of literature, a full package of subject itself. It is not that okay, this category was only about some sections and the other sections are missing, and this is not complete section, I would say, or does not present the complete life of the Native American people. No, every single category of this literature, American literature, represents the life at whole. So that we can say that this is another. Then the third category, the most notable category is of the white American literature. White American literature is all the time, I would say, uh, I would not call it as Native American literature, sorry, white American literature in a sense, because white American literature was strongly influenced by the European literature, by European literature. And the white people that you can see over there, most of them, they are the Europeans. They are the Europeans. Because if you just need to know the real identities of the Native Americans, they were not white, they were red, the Native Americans. So they were red in their colors. But how the people, the white people, think so that they are the representatives and the pioneers of America, because they are the Europeans. They settled over this land for more than 400 years, and they have been there, and they got marriages. They got married with the people, with the Native American women, and they got the children. So ultimately, you see that they were most of the time the Europeans, the white European, including the Britishers, including the French people or the Spanish or the Dutch people. So all these white American identities are not the Native Americans. They are different from the Native Americans, and they are, I would say, not the true founders of America, because they are the settlers. The true representatives are basically the Native American. On the other side, the black Africans, they are not also the founders or the pioneers, but they are also the people or the slaves who have been transported from Africa for the sake of sugar plantation, for the sake of other plantation in the region of America at that time. So in the third category of white American literature, we see that the literature that has been written, they have just keep on justifying themselves. They are just keep on justifying themselves as the legitimate ruler, as the legitimate inhabitants or the natives of Americas, of the real Americas. Rather, they are not. They are not the true, or I would say the real inhabitants or the aboriginal of America, but they are just keep on saying that we are. They are justifying themselves. They are justifying themselves that we are the true representatives, but they are not, because we know that why Americans are not the true representatives. So they just keep on justifying themselves in many of the works in which they are legitimizing their rules, they are legitimizing themselves that whatever we have done with the people, with the other complexions like the black people and with the red people, that was justified. And what was the reason? Because those people were cannibals, those people were uncivilized or uneducated. So we gave them education, we gave them enlightening of the religion, we gave them everything that they deserved. So that is the reason we can say that the third category was developed, that is the white American. And that a white American can also be called as white European, in my opinion, because they are not the true representatives of America, rather, they were also the settlers from the other lands. Okay, so this because sometimes you know that whenever we are talking about these things, so we are going beyond the expedition of our subject. But I wish so that we, as I all the time claim, that we must not be wondering about such things. That why we are going too much far in the things that is not related to our subject, even though this is all related to your subject. But the thing is, the real thing is that we just need to get more into this, because I would say that uh, if you are wearing or putting up this attitude of literature when you are connecting the things with one another, then you are a true literary student. And if you are just going to talk about what the thing is happened already, so what is your contribution? That thing can also be known by anyone else. Even a child can talk about that thing. So, what is your contribution? I think your contribution must be connecting the things with one another while bringing new experiences on the surface every day, every moment. And I would say this is what we can say a true representative of literature or true literary students. And if you just stop connecting the things with one another, what will happen? Nothing will happen. Rather, your exposure, your wide exposure will be diminished. It will be shrinking day by day, and then it will again be the same as you have started as a beginner. So you have to just you have to just expose your ideas, explore your ideas. You have to just widen your range. You have to just widen your horizon of literature, of your understanding, and of the ideas, so that you may get more into it. You may get the better understanding of the things that are happening around you all the time. Okay, so this was all about the background that we have discussed and some of the information that I just included new into it. And now I'm just going to share my screen with you people, so that you may know about more that what we are going to study. You know that now we are going to study the literature, now the poems of Robert Frost and all of the other writers. And I will, with your permission, I will do one more experiment with you people in this, and that is that if I be able to add some forms of all these three categories into this, that will not be part of your syllabus, but that will be the part of your understanding and knowledge. And if you say so, then I will be adding some 2 or 3 points of every category, or 2 or 3 works of every category, like the Afro-American, and on the other side, I'll be adding some work of Shaman Alexi, the Native American. so that you may understand in a better way that what are the other categories all about. But if we are just fine with this category, then it is also okay. You may also suggest about your opinions in the group also. So in today's lecture, we are going to talk about, let me share my screen with you people so you can see what I have today to tell about. Okay, yes, is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. So now we are going to talk about and discuss some of the literary devices used in literature. And these are the most important literary devices that I have collected for you people. And every category talks about a separate and distinguished concept of literature. Every single category. Category means device. So these are the literary devices that will help you to understand literature, poems, poetry, and all the art of literature in a good way and with a different angle. Okay, in a good way and with a different angle. So what are they? Some of them you already know about, and some of them are new to you, and we will be discussing everything because before studying American poetry or American literature, it is important to know about the literary devices that are used in American literature or in the British literature. So we are already acquainted and familiar with the British literature. So we just need to know about that what are the devices that are used in American literature and how they are used. What is the purpose of using them in literature? So we have, I would say, that certain literary devices, and each literary device talks and represents a different and distinguished section of the life. So we will be categorizing all these literary devices in today's lecture because when you will be studying the poetry or the poems, then you will have to find these literary devices out of those poems. Because if you will do so, then you will you will be increasing your taste of understanding, and it will give you more appeal, it will give you more amusement than the casual one. So that is the reason that we have to just go through from all these devices. Okay, what we have here first is that you already know. It is allegory, or the other pronunciation can be allegory. So allegory is all about, you know that already, that what allegory means, that it gives you a double meaning, but on the other science, on a sense or on a wider level, allegory is a story that is used to represent a more general message about real life, historical issues, and or events. It is typically an entire book, novel, or play. So you see that it is a category that represents a more general message about real life. So it is a more general message about the real life. But you know that there are some other messages too in the story, hidden in the story. It means that allegory is all about the two different stories. I would say that one story that is about the general issues or the general events. The other story that is the real story, and that we can call story two. So that story two is the story one is the representation of the story two. Like if something real happened, that real happening cannot be written in the same sense, in the same way, but that real happening is generalized in any other situation. So when you read about the general situation, you know about the real situation. So that is, I would say, the beauty of allegory. And allegory can be found in the work of American literature, Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller has used this category of literature in America He has used this category in his work, in his play, The Crucible. The Crucible is a play that talks about Joseph McCarthy or McCarthyism. He was a senator in the mid of the century in America, and he alleged the people, the 200 official card carrying people, that they are communists. Okay, and then after that, Joseph McCarthy, with his power, with his authority, he blacklisted Arthur Miller and many of the other writers. They were all blacklisted and they were put into jail by that senator, a powerful senator. And you know that writer is all the time a writer, and that writer has to write in any way, whatever the situation is. So even he cannot write directly about Joseph McCarthy's totalitarianism. So he has to use another way to talk about or to criticize the way of dealing of Joseph McCarthy. So what he has done, he has used allegory, and in his work, The Crucible, he did not talk about Joseph McCarthy's rule, Joseph McCarthy's authority, Joseph McCarthy's corruption, demoralization. No, he talked about another story that belonged to 1692. That story belonged to 1692. That story belongs to the town, the Salem village. That was the Salem town or the Salem village. And he has taken the female character, Abigail Williams, to talk about Joseph McCarthy's corruption, Joseph McCarthy's deception, Joseph McCarthy's lies, that he has spoken about the 200 card carrying people, official card carrying people, that they are communists. And this is the beauty, I would say, of literature, that how, even though without mentioning the name of the real culprit or the real, I would say, guilty, he has managed to write about the whole play, has written about the same person, Joseph McCarthy, even though without mentioning the name of that person one time. There is no mention of Joseph McCarthy in that play, but that whole play is all about Joseph McCarthy. So this is the beauty of allegory that is used by not only American writer Arthur Miller, but there are many other writers. You can also see George Orwell's. George Orwell's dystopian book that is Animal Farm, and it is also an allegory for the events preceding the Russian Revolution and the Stalinist era in the early 20th century. So it is also about, I would say, the Animal Farm. It does not talk about the animal in the real sense. All the animals in that book, The Animal Farm by George Orwell, it talks about the real people. It talks about the people of the Russian Revolution, that how they are going to, uh, 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 I would say, destroy the things, how they are going to ruin the things in the world. So they have the animalistic qualities. The real characters have been given the animalistic qualities, and they have been given the real names of the animals too. So this is how they are going to narrate one situation, one particular or realistic situation, with the usage of, you can say, some imaginary characters, or with some imaginary events. So this is allegory, and you also have the two examples of allegory. This is a, I would say, poetic device, that is also literary device, that is also used in poetry, and it is also sometimes used in literature too. But most of the time, it is used in literature, especially for novels, for books, for tragedies, and all of the other things. But it is less used in the poetry. Alliteration. Alliteration is a series of words or phrases that all or almost all start with the same sound. So alliteration is starting all the alphabets or the words or the phrases with the same sound. Okay, like it is alliteration. You see that these sounds are typically consonants to give more stress to the syllables. And what is that stress? Like every single or the first letter of the word sounds the same. And most of the time they are consonant. Alliteration is all about the consonant same sounds in the starting of a line, of a poem, of a stanza, of a couplet. And then you'll often come across alliteration in poetry, titles of books and poems. As you can see the example of this by Jane Austen's novels, Pride and Prejudice. So P and P, Pride and Prejudice. Sense and Sensibility. So now the Sense and Sensibility, they sound the same. Pride and Prejudice, they sound the same. So this is called alliteration. You have another example of a tongue twister. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. So this is another example of alliteration. Let me give you another example of this alliteration from the real life, from the I would say from a poem. There is a poem of Percy P.B. Shelley, Percy the Shelley. He has written "Ode to the uh, Wild West." So Wild West. This is also another example of alliteration. And there is another slogan that you can remember the word alliteration, that is the, the wild west wind. The wild west wind. So all these three W's, they sound the same. And this is, you can say, because they are the consonants, so this is the alliteration of the series of alphabets or of the phrases. So this is alliteration. And in poetry, you know that this expression is common because they have to use such similar sound words or consonants that they appeal the hearing or the listening of the readers, or of the people, like same sounds. So it gives a metrical combination or a rhythmic combination or a symphonic combination to your appeal, to your hearing. So that is the reason that alliteration is used, and we will see in American poetry that alliteration is used. Then we have allusion, that you already know that allusion. Allusion is a reference. But what this reference is? Allusion is a reference back, particularly a reference back to any historical event, to any historical happening, to any historical, I would say, situation. So that is an allusion. This must not be mistaken with illusion, with I. Allusion, it means to allude something, to reference, to give reference something in the past or related to any situation. Allusion is when an author makes an indirect reference to a figure, place, event, or idea originating from outside the text. Many allusions make reference to previous work of literature or art. It means that this is a reference back to any work of literature or previous work or any art or any event or any place. So this is allusion. You see that most of the time the the writers of the Elizabethan era, they have alluded some of the works of the Greek or of the Roman people. They have alluded sometimes the character of Helen into drama. They have alluded sometimes Odysseus, sometimes Paris, sometimes they have taken the characters of other people, of other heroes, of other writers. It means that they are alluding something from the historical archives, from the literature, from the history, from the past, from the happenings of the past into their current literature. So that is an allusion or a reference back to any particular or historical event. Okay, then we have another important, I would say, that literary device, and that is anachronism. Anachronism, that it is all about, I would say, uh, when you have to mutilate one word or change one word or the expression of the expression of the one word, and you are giving it a new way of expressing the thing or new way of saying the things with a comic or a comic effect. That is anarchism. Let's have a look at the definition. An anarchism occurs when there is an intentional error in the chronology of the timeline of a text. This could be a character who appears in a different time period than when he actually lived, or a technology that appears before it was invented. Anachronisms were often used for comedic effect. So we can say that anachronisms are the using of the words, using of any intentional error, intentional error or technological error, or you can say the error of the language intentionally, knowingly, in any work, because you know that does not belong to this thing or this era, but you intentionally do that. So then that is called anachronism. Like, let me give you an example. If a writer belonging to Greek times, if that writer talks about science fiction, or leave it, if that writer talks about mobile phone, you know that at that time mobile phone wasn't invented. So why and how the writer can talk about this thing? So that is called anachronism, because sometimes the purpose of using anachronisms in the in the poetry or in the in the works, or especially in the cinematography, to just give a comic relief to the people. Okay, like you can have an example: a Renaissance king who says, "Oh, that's dope, dude." So now you see that this word, the type of language is very modern and not actually from the Renaissance period. So that is anachronism, because that thing does not belong to that era, but you are actually making that writer, making that character to speak the language of modern times intentionally, intentionally. So that is anachronism. Then we have anaphora. Anaphora is when a word or phrase is repeated at the beginning of multiple sentences throughout a piece of writing. So now you see that anaphora is a word or phrase that is repeated at the beginning of sentences multiple times. Sometimes this expression is used by the poets and the writers to stress and to emphasize on any particular theme or any particular central idea. This, because when a writer is actually repeating in every stanza, in every couplet, in every paragraph, the same line, it means that he wants us to stress on that central idea, because that is his concern. And it's used to emphasize the repeated phrases and evoke strong feelings in the audience. So you have a famous example of anaphora is Winston Churchill's "We shall fight on the beaches." That is a that is an extract from the speech of Winston Churchill, that we shall fight on the beaches, related to the, I would say, the world wars. And then "we shall fight." So this was, I would say, the phrase that became a slogan, because this is extracted by the speech of Winston Churchill, because he just wanted to uh, give the motivation, give the strength and courage to the people who have been waiting for the troops, waiting for the enemies at the beaches to fight them. So we can say that this is "we shall fight on the beaches." And there is another example of anaphora that I can quote from the practical example, a practical example from your from the things that you have already experienced. You might have observed in first year syllabus, there is a speech, an extract of speech, a lesson, uh, and who was the name? Yes, Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream. So you see that how many times that phrase "I have a dream," "I have a dream" repeated in that lesson. So that is also another example of anaphora that you can also quote. It means repeatedly using of sentences or phrases or words that that's sole purpose is to stress on something or to evoke the strong feelings of emotions in the people, in the audience, or in the soldier, or whatever you can call it. That is the real example of anaphora, and this is another, I would say, this is another good poetic device that will be used in American literature. So that is called anaphora. One thing more, that if these devices, these poetic devices, if they are not all of them, not a part of American literature, so it is not that you will be not using them in other for other books or for other things. You can use them everywhere. It means that if you are talking about all these devices separately, they all are different angles and aspects to look at one literary text, to look at one piece of poetry. It means that if you are looking at any piece of poetry from one angle, but after going through all these devices, you will be able to look at the same literary poetry or piece of poetry with different angles and aspects. So this is what you need to do. Okay, so anthropomorphism. What is anthropomorphism? Anthropomorphism occurs when something non-human, such as an animal, place, or inanimate object, behaves in a human-like way. This seems to be like the personification, but personification and anthropomorphism is different in some characteristics, because personification is all about when you are giving the qualities of the human beings, qualities of the human beings or the characteristics of the human beings to non-living human beings. And here is the case then when you are actually, when something non-human such as an animal, place, or inanimate object behaves. So this is all about the non-human. So it means that non-human can be any animal, it can be a place or inanimate. But on the other side, we see that in the personification talks about the things that are not non-human, so that are like the human beings, or you can say the humanoid, like the human people. Okay, so what is anthro anthropomorphism? It is all about when you are giving the qualities, like the non-human qualities to the human, or human qualities to the non-human. And what is that non-human characters? You see that children's cartoons have many examples of anthropomorphism. For example, Mickey and Minnie Mouse and can speak, wear clothes, sing, dance, drive cars, etc. So we can say that these are the qualities of human beings that have been given to the non-humans, and like the qualities of animals. You can also quote here the examples of George Orwell's Animal Farm, because they all are the animals over there, but they are given the qualities of the human. It means that the human qualities or the non-human qualities, they are alike in that novel. So you can also quote example from George Orwell's Animal Farm too. You can also quote example of Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, a prose writer, Jonathan Swift. So you can also quote example of Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Okay, another good thing about the literary devices, that they all are talking about different styles of writing. Okay, not only aspects of writing, but different styles of writings, because sometimes one writer is adapted, one writer is skilled in one thing and the another is skilled in another thing. Now we will talk about, when we talk about we are talking about American literature, and we do not talk about the colloquialism, then it means that it is wasted. What is colloquialism? Colloquialism is the usage of slang language, I would say. It is the usage of informal language. And that informal language is, it doesn't mean that you are intentionally doing that. You are you are intentionally including the language of any particular region into that work, into that piece of poetry, so that the language may speak directly of that region. So the language may become the representation directly of that region. Like if you say that, okay, I cannot understand Punjabi language, Punjabi of Jhang language. Sorry, Punjabi language of Jhang. If you do not understand that language, so if you are using that language, not in the real sense, but you are including some of English words and some of Urdu and some of other Punjabi, good Punjabi words, then what will happen? That the true representation of the language of Jhang will not be will not be done because you did not include the real language. So you have to do to use the real expressions of that particular region, the real expressions, so that you may talk about or discuss that particular place or people or the expressions of them in a real sense. So that is the reason that we can say that colloquialism is important. On the other side, we also have some slangs of language and the colloquials of the language because some of them, the people who are living in Lahore and they have been living in Lahore since their childhood, they do not know anything about the colloquial language of the villages. Even though I have some colloquial expressions in our village, in our area, that you don't even know that what is all about. But they are associated with our culture, they are associated with our language, with our tradition. So they are, I would say, the true representation. Whether they are true, whether they are false, whether they are unreal, but they are the expressions associated with the culture. And if they are taken as it is, that is, I would say, the colloquial expression of the language. Rather, it is informal, but that is the real expression or that is the real representation. So now let's take a look at the definition. Colloquialism is the use of informal language and slang. It's often used by author to lend a sense of realism to their characters and dialogue. Forms of colloquialism include words, phrases, and contractions that aren't real words, such as gonna, ain't. You know that these are the expressions of American people that they are skipping the sounds all the time, uh, like they are using most of the time nasal sounds. The American people, and their speed is they are more speedy than the British or the British neighbors. They are more speedy in pronouncing the sounds. And the third thing in their colloquial language is that they are skipping the last sound of every word most of the time. Like the nasal sound ain't gonna work. Most of the time they are using it ain't gonna work. And it is not going, not going. So then they are also skipping the G sound from the word. So it ain't. They are using this contraction like the Americans. It ain't going. So now they are not. It does not seem appropriate to listen to them most of the time. That is the thing that the American speakers are not easily understandable. You have to focus on every single word that they speak. Then you will come to know about, okay, this is all about what he's saying or what she's saying. On the other side, we know that the British English, they have to use and they have to give a proper stress on every word because they are using the proper vocabulary, proper grammar, proper word structure and sentence structures to say or to talk about anything or any idea. So that is the reason we can say that colloquialism. That colloquialism is associated with the region, with the towns, with the villages, with the areas where you live. And Like he has used he don't, even though with contraction don't, he do not, he didn't use he does not, he has used he don't. What's going on? So I would say that at certain rules, because Arthur Miller wanted to give the real expression of a working class, of a poor class, of a middle class, I would say, because that is the real beauty of the colloquialism or of the regional colloquialism. And if you just do that, it means that you are realistically depicting the lives of the people of that particular region. So this is what we can say colloquialism. Yeah. Okay. So now epigraph. So an epigraph is when an author inserts a famous quotation, poem, song, or other short passages or text at the beginning of a large text. So epigraph is sometimes, you know, that writers, they take the lines, the quotations, the words, the expressions of the other writers, sometimes of their contemporaries, sometimes of their precedent writers, to use them in their own works, in their own poetry, work of poetry, in their own novels and dramas. So this is called epigraph. And you can see that epigraph is in which you are taking the words, the titles also. Let me give you what example they have given. At the beginning of Ernest Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises, an epigraph that consists of a quotation from poet Gertrude Stein, which reads, you are all a lost generation, and a passage from the Bible. So we can see, even though Ernest Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises, an epigraph that consists of a quotation from poet Gertrude Stein. So it means that he has used Gertrude Stein's quotation in his book. The Sun Also Rises. Let me give you another example from any other piece of literature. But before that, let me have a sip of water. Okay. So let me give you another example of what example should I give? An irrelevant example. Yeah. There is a poet, W.B. Yeats, William Butler Yeats. You might have heard the name of the poet. So W.B. Yeats has written a poem that is the Second Coming. This Second Coming. The name of the poem is Second Coming, and in that poem there is a line, a couplet, I would say, that is, things fall apart, things fall apart, the center cannot hold, the mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. These are the exact words, and I must appreciate my memory that I still remember them after 4 or 5 years. So there is a poem of W.B. Yeats, The Second Coming, and there are two lines. What are they? Uh, the things fall apart, center cannot hold, the mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. So now we have to take things fall apart. Now, things fall apart is an epigraph, and things fall apart has been used as a title by Nigerian writer, and his name is Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe has used this epigraph by W.B. Yeats in his novel Things Fall Apart. So I would say that that is a perfect example of an epigraph, because Chinua Achebe has used the expression, the line of W.B. Yeats, just to title the whole novel. That is the second, Things Fall Apart. So you can also see and check the example. So that is a perfect example, I would say, about the epigraph. Okay, another good, I would say, expression or good technique that you all must know, and I think that I have also used this technique in my lectures in the classroom most of the time. Euphemism. Euphemism is a mild or indirect word or expressions used in place of another word or phrase that is considered harsh, blunt, vulgar, or unpleasant. Like, that is called euphemism. So euphemism is an expression, is a word, is a technique that we can use on the replacement of harsh words, on the replacements of blunt or unpleasant words. You see that most of the time, as I have quoted this example multiple times with you people, that if we say that in Urdu, wo mar gaya. So this is a harsh expression. And on the other side, if we say that वो वफात पा गए, तो ये क्या है, उसका दूसरा एक्सप्रेशन है, यूफेमिस्टिक हम बनाते जा रहे हैं और सॉफ्ट एक्सप्रेशन देते जा रहे हैं. और थर्ड में अगर हम कहते हैं कि वो पर्दा फरमा गए, तो ये उससे भी ज्यादा माइल्ड एक्सप्रेशन है, यूफेमिस्टिक एक्सप्रेशन है. इट मींस कि मर गया और किसके बाद जो है वो पर्दा, कितना इन अल्फाज में फर्क है. सो दैट इज कॉल्ड euphemism because you are using a mild or indirect word or expression on the replacement of harsh, blunt, and vulgar words. So that is what we can say. Sometimes you see that, like if someone says, "Oh shit," so now the word "shit" is most of the time in movies. If you are watching HBO, so they are not actually using this word. Rather, the lip sync of the character will do the same, but in the subtitles you will see that the word shit is replaced by crack. It is crap, I would say. It is hack. Like the hell word is also replaced by hack. What is the heck is going on? On the other side, the word shit is replaced by crap. So this is how we can say, how we can use euphemism, and I hope so this is also clear. Flashbacks. Another good technique to remember, because flashbacks, this is a most common technique, I would say, that is most of the time used, sorry to say that, used in Indian dramas. So flashback is an interruption in a narrative that depicts events that have already occurred either before the present time or before the time at which the narration takes place. So you see that flashbacks is a technique that comes from the already narration events that have already occurred either before the present time or before the time at which the narration takes place. So you see that your events, you are recalling your experiences, you are recalling your young age if you are old enough in the present age. So that is flashback techniques. And this flashback technique is used to give the reader more background information and details about specific characters, events, plots, points, and so on. Let me give you an example of any work that we have studied. Yeah, we have studied Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, and you can call that in Oedipus Rex there are some flashes or the flashbacks that we can recall that it is also associated with the history, especially when we can call the blindness of Tiresias, and on the other side, when the people they have been recalling when there was a prophecy of Lois, and on the other side Jocasta in the house of Cadmus. So at that time these were the flashbacks, because in the middle of the story sometimes we are actually gone and driven back to give the information about the early happening in the play or in the tragedy. So that we can call also a perfect example of flashbacks. And this technique is most of the time used in different movies. In movies, So you can see the flashback technique is used in movies and is sometimes in dramas, because in dramas, when the any novel, sorry, when any drama is starting from the middle or starting from the end. Let me give you another example of Pakistani drama. Okay, yeah, there is a drama, Meri Zaat Zarra Benishan, and you can call that drama is full of flashbacks, from the beginning to the end. That is full of flashbacks. So you that is also another practical example that you can go. Yeah, another technique that is foreshadowing, and I hope so that you already know about the foreshadowing techniques, that how the writers are using this technique in talking about the events that they are going to experience. And foreshadowing is when an author indirectly hints at, through things such as dialogue, description, or characters' actions, what's to come later on in the story. So this device is often used to introduce tension to a narrative. So we already know about the foreshadowing technique, and I have already explained the word foreshadow. It means the shadow that is in front of you. So you have to follow that shadow all the time, because whenever wherever that shadow takes you to, so you have to follow the shadow also, because your shadow is giving you a clue, a hint where to move, where to go. So that is the reason we can say that that is a foreshadowing technique. And foreshadowing technique is also used, I would say, in different. Okay. That this is when we have used. So that is another technique of foreshadowing. Okay, and then we have hyperbole. Hyperbole is, you can say, that is when you have to exaggerate something. You know that literature is never been completed, or literature is not going to be completed without this hyperbole or exaggeration, because you have to exaggerate most of the time, not sometimes, particular situations. So hyperbole is an exaggerated statement that's not meant to be taken literally by the reader. So this must not be taken literally or in reality. Rather, sometimes this is called, you can say, a kind of expression, a hyperbolic expression or exaggerated expression. Sometimes you can say when you are dead tired, you are saying, I am dead tired today, even though you are not dead tired. So dead tired that means that you are dead. But dead tired means that you are too broken, you are entirely exhausted, completely exhausted. On the other side, you also use hyperbole to talk about anything. Like if I will say that I have. Okay, let me give you another example of a movie. A million. Uh, what was that? Yeah, A Thousand Ways to Die in West. That is a movie about the cowboys. A Thousand Ways to Die in West. So now you can see that They, even though when I watched the movie, I was expecting that they will be showing me the thousand ways to die, but they have only talked about, I would say, 10 to 15 ways of dying. It means that that is also a hyperbolic effect, an exaggeration. Sometimes when you cannot lift your bag full of books, so you may say that, oh, my bag weigh a ton. So that is also a hyperbolic effect. And writers, they are most of the time using this hyperbolic and exaggerated expression in their poetry or in their expressions, imagery. So imagery is all the time, I would say, the most easy thing to know about, because it talks about and describes the theme, thing, or idea that it appeals to our senses: taste, smell, sight, touch, or hearing. So this device is often used to help the reader clearly visualize the parts of the story by creating a strong mental picture. So that is the word that will describe the definition of imagery, that it creates a mental picture in the mind of a reader when he goes through the work of a writer or of a poet. So that is, I would say, it is like a mental map. So that mental map gives you something about, it gives you about the sense, it gives you about more detailed information, or it gives you sometimes more about that something visualized is going to happen in the story, because there is a mental picture, strong mental picture, when you are going through that story or that work. Like you can also see here an example by Wordsworth's famous poem, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. When all at once I saw a crowd. So now when I will be reading the line, you will reading this stanza, so you will be having a mental picture. When all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So now you see, you can imagine now that there is a lake, and behind that lake, sorry, by that lake, there is a bunch of daffodils, golden flowers. They are swaying in the air. So this is how you can see and imagine that scene of Wordsworth from I Wandered Lonely as a Crowd. So this is, I would say, imagery, irony that you already know about, and then we have three types of irony. So let's have a quick look. Irony is when a statement is used to express an opposite meaning than the one literally expressed by it. What are they? First is verbal irony, when someone says something but means the opposite. Situational irony, when something happens that's the opposite of what was expected or intended to happen. So when something happens contrary to your expectation, that is situational. So you know that Oedipus Rex happening, expectation was totally contrary. So that is, you can say, situational. Dramatic irony, when the audience is aware of the true intentions or outcomes while the characters are not. As a result, certain actions and or events take on different meanings. So this is also, you can say, dramatic irony, in which the audience knew about the fate of Oedipus Rex, but Oedipus Rex himself was unaware from this stage. Okay, then we have juxtaposition, and juxtaposition is the comparing and contrasting of two or more different ideas, characters, objects. This little device is often used to help create a clearer picture of the characteristics of one object or idea by comparing with those of another. So you have already, I have already told you people about this juxtaposition, because juxtaposition is a comparing of two different ideas into one sentence. And sometimes, you know, that one sentence talks about, one sentence is actually segregated with the two opposite ideas. The one idea is positive if the second idea would be different, it will be negative. If the first idea is good, the second idea would be bad, because that is the combination of juxtaposition. Because there are two different ideas in one sentence, or two different characters that you know. So you can take example of Charles Dickens' novel, A Tale of Two Cities, in which he has the opening line of that novel talks about it was the best of time, it was the worst of time, it was the time of darkness, it was the time of light, it was the time of hope, it was the time of hopelessness. So that you can, if you can remember, that you have studied in second semester. So that was, you can say, a juxtaposition, because every single sentence, it comprises two ideas, two opposite ideas. The one is the best, the second is the worst. The one is the light, the second is the darkness. So it is a kind of, or a combination of two binaries, two different binaries. Okay, so now we have another term, and I would say this is an interesting one. And how much time we have? 7 minutes. Okay, so then malapropism. Malapropism. Malapropism happens when an incorrect word is used in place of a word that has a similar sound. So sometimes you know that people are, they are, what they are doing? They are devastating different words, different expressions. They are ruining the people's name, even though some, like when we were children, you already know that. So we were have this we have had this habit to change the people's name from their real name to the other names. So this was, or this have been our all habit of all the children. And how does this happen? Sometimes this is to give a comic expression when you are changing the name of the real name into another name. Sometimes this is done intentionally, and sometimes it is done most of the time it is done intentionally to create a comic effect, I would say. This seems sometimes nonsensical and humorous at the same time. So you see, there's an example that I just can't wait to dance the flamingo. So flamingo is the animal. You might have seen flamingo. They have long, pointed, red beaks, and then they are white, and they have red foot. So they are flamingo, and they are living on the beaches, especially in Amazon River. And then flamingo on the other side. Here, a character has accidentally called the flamenco. That is a type of dance. But instead of calling it flamenco, he has called it flamingo. That is an animal. So that is expression of malapropism, because you are not calling the right thing, right name, right person, right word, but you are using another. Let me give you another practical example. My father, I would say, that used to call me whenever I just visited my house. So he just used to call me, instead of professor, he was calling surfessor. Okay, so that is another, I would say, example of malapropism, because you are not calling the exact name, but you are using another way to express that thing just to give a comic effect. Okay, so like you can also call not professor, but like processor, but do not do this in my class. Okay, so then metaphor and simile, that you are already familiar with what is metaphor and simile. And let me see if there is another. Yeah, mood. So mood is the general feeling that writer wants the audience to have. Sometimes you know that the mood of the poem or of the novel, of the work, is very serious. Sometimes it is very light. Sometimes it is very satirical. So it depends on the writer that which mood, which setting, which dialogues he has chosen for the audience or for the readers. Then onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is another expression. That is a word that represents a sound and actually resembles or imitates the sound itself. Sometimes you say that, like bee, buzz, boom. So now you see that how they are giving the meaning of the word, like the bee is buzzing, and then the boom. So like when something happens alive, so the sound of that happening is the same. So that is actually, you can say, an onomatopoeia, because that sounds also copies the same or resembles the same with the happening or with that thing. Then oxymoron, we have oxymoron is a combination of two words that together express a contradictory meaning. So oxymoron is a situation, most of the time puzzling situation, that you see that yes, it can be seen otherwise and it can be seen in the same sense. Like if you are having a glass of water, a half glass of water, you can see that it gives you an oxymoron. What it is, like you can say that okay, this is glass, half glass of water, but on the other side you can also say that no, it is half empty glass of water. So half empty glass of water and half glass of water, they are two different, I would say, and puzzling sounds and puzzling ideas. So on the other side, when you talk about, there are certain words like organized chaos. You cannot say that organized chaos, because chaos is never organized. Or you cannot say that it is a silence scream. Silence scream. So silence scream, they are oxymoron of one another. Cruelly kind is cruelly kind. So cruelly is, I would say, belonging to the other thing. The kind is another thing. Insanely logical. So how logical can be insane? So these are the oxymorons that you can, like you can also have, you also have to look at the picture. Yeah, and you have to see that okay, you can see that a classical example of, are they going up or down? So these are the stairs. What do you see, that are they going up or down? You cannot decide. So this is what we can say oxymoron is. It is all the time puzzling. Personification, we are already done that. Repetition, yeah, most of the time the writers, they are actually repeating the words in any poem, in any stanza, because he wants he wants to actually emphasize on a central idea or a purpose. And it is often used in poetry for purpose of rhythm as well, because so purpose of doing this, you're using this, is the rhythm. So I hope so that satire is also known, soliloquy is also known. So now tone, sometimes the tone is good, sometimes the tone is bad, sometimes the tone is very grieved. Okay, yeah. Okay. So now we are done with our literary devices, and I hope so that you have a reasonable knowledge and understanding about the thing that we have gone through. Now you can take your next class, and I think that your teacher must be waiting for you. So till, if you have to ask any question, you can ask me in the group. So thank you so much for attending today's lecture. Take care of yourself and your family in this pandemic, because you people are important to your family and your families are important to you as well. So till then, take care. Allah Hafiz. But if you do not have any class, you can ask me anything if you like to. Otherwise, if you have, then you can go. Okay, I think that you have a class. So take care. Bye bye.